Welcome to our daily reflection for this Sunday, August 3rd. And today, all the readings interrelate in a beautiful way to the theme about the vanity of having more than enough. And of course, how much is too much? Well, this is exactly the question that we see from the first reading in the Old Testament from Ecclesiastes. And we have this character, Koheleth, who says, vanity of vanities. Somebody with wisdom and a great work ethic, labors and works, and he produces all of this wealth and property, but then he has to leave it to somebody when he dies, because death will eventually come, and the wiser and the more hardworking, the more property one leaves behind. And that excess of property, that wealth that's been built up, can't be used by that person who dies any longer. And so it seems to be an exercise in vanity. And so what a waste, because it goes to somebody who didn't labor and work hard for it. And that seems to be, in a sense, an injustice and a great frustration. And that frustration of Koheleth is now, he's venting basically about the frustration of having worked so hard to gain so much, and yet it goes to somebody who didn't work. And so that's this great question. And of course, this plays into exactly what we see in the Psalm today, Psalm 90, which is the only psalm attributed to Moses. And for the previous week and the next week, we've been hearing about the story of Moses in Exodus and Numbers. And here we have the only psalm attributed to Moses. And it's a psalm of humble request, asking, Lord, give me the wisdom to number my days aright. In other words, to know that man's life is but a breath. And in other words, there's a wisdom in knowing that our days are short, they're brief. Life is short and it's passing by quickly. How do we use the few days that we have wisely? That is the question. And so Psalm 90 is praying for that wisdom to know how to use the shortness of life, the brevity of life, to be wise about that, right? And that's a good counterpoint to Koheleth, who's saying it's vain, that death is going to come and I'm going to have all this possessions. And so how do I make good use of these possessions if death comes? How do I not end up in waste and vanity and frustration? Well, Jesus gives us the answer in the gospel today. So let's look at that. In the gospel, someone comes up to Jesus and says, Rabbi, tell my brother to share and divide up the inheritance with me. Now, of course, an elder brother oftentimes gets the lion's share of the property in ancient inheritance in agrarian society. And then Jesus responds, well, who's made me your judge and arbiter over your case? And then Jesus gives a point of wisdom. He says, look, be careful to guard against all greed, right? So this younger brother is troubled. He's upset. He wants justice against his brother. And Jesus tells him, look, the solution to your problem isn't necessarily having an arbiter come in and judge between you and your brother. The solution to your problem may actually be in what you desire, right? And so Jesus warns against all greed, the desire for property, the desire for wealth. And he warns that one's life doesn't consist in possessions. So maybe this younger brother is thinking, hey, it's not fair. My brother gets the lion's share of the inheritance. This isn't fair. And he's upset. He's disheartened. And Jesus is saying, look, life is bigger than possessions. Possessions are not the path to happiness. And I think Jesus is trying to tell us that, because it's a message we get from the world so often, so frequently, so commonly, that we all kind of tend to assume that it's important to have possessions to have happiness. And Jesus is saying, Jesus is decoupling those two things. Possessions, property, do not equal happiness. Life and its fulfillment is not about possessions. It's about other things. It's about virtue. It's about love. It's about friendships and relationships. And Jesus is suggesting maybe this younger brother is letting his relationship with his older brother be ruined over property. And life is more about relationships and friendships and charity than possessions and land, right? That could very well be. And then Jesus gets to the point, and he reinforces Koheleth's point in the first reading when he says a parable about a man who had great, harvest. He built huge storage barns. He stored up a lot for himself. For years to come, he had more than enough. And then death comes to him, and all that more than enough, all that he stored up is squandered, wasted. It benefits him nothing. Where's the wisdom in this, though? Right? Is this vanity inevitable as Koheleth saw it? No, Jesus responds. He says, it'll be for all who store up wealth for themselves will find vanity. But, Jesus says, but for those who, it's vanity for those who store up wealth for themselves and are not rich in what matters to God. So what matters to God is what we give, not what we get. And so that man who built these extra storage barns, he wasted that wealth because he didn't share it. He didn't give it away. And so the truth that Jesus is showing us is if we want to really be rich, we need to be rich in terms of treasure in heaven. And the only way to have treasure in heaven is to give away what we have on earth before death takes us. It's easy to give it away when we die in our will, but here's the challenge that Jesus has given us in the gospel. What are you going to give away before you die? That is what matters, because that's where the treasure in heaven is accrued. He doesn't say you store up treasure in your will, but you store up treasure in what you give while you're alive. Giving while living is what Jesus is challenging us today. Let's think about that and how we think about our giving. May the Lord bless and keep you. And I'm grateful for all of you who give in our mission circle and our donors who are giving while living. Thank you for your support of our mission. May the Lord bless you in abundance. Take care.